Welcome to another session of PRINCE2 Quickie, and in this session we shall be talking about the organization theme. If you recall the principles, there is a principle in PRINCE2 that says that a project has defined and agreed roles and responsibilities within an organization structure that engages the business user and supplier stakeholder interests. Well, so much for that. Here we're going to look at the mechanisms as to how that it's going to be done. Okay. Basically, the assumption is that people in a project team comes from different backgrounds. Now, that may not necessarily be so in a particular project. However, it makes good sense if you want to have a generalized project management method to assume that's the case, because that's the worst case scenario, okay, where everybody in the team comes from a different background. So we're really talking about cross-functional, teams. Each team member, despite having come from a different kind of part of the organization or even outside the organization, needs to know what's required of them, okay, what's their responsibilities, and how should they communicate with others in team as well as the relevant stakeholders or people outside of the team. Okay. All three interests must be represented in the PRINCE2 projects. And what are they? Basically, the three of them are the business, the user, the end user who's going to be using the products of the project, and the supply side. More about that later. Okay, if we have less than these three interests being represented, it represents an imbalance, bad governance, because unless all these three major interests are represented, there will be certain decisions that would be made in a kind of lacking kind of situation. So the project management team structure basically unites all the players in a kind of structure framework with well-defined roles and relationships between them. Yeah. Now back to our kind of multi-pointed star to illustrate different information that you need about the team. Okay? And I shall leave you to read that for yourself, because we need really within our time constraints to move on to the next slide. Before we do that, PRINCE2 has a basis that there is a customer-supplier relationship. Even though the customer or the supplier could be part of your organization as well. Okay, let's look at the different levels of management within the PRINCE2 project. At the top, we refer to the corporate or program management, because that's a level which the project's team, including the project board themselves, report to. You see what's shown here on this slide. In the blue box would be the project management team proper within the PRINCE2 project. The top level of the project management team would be team, right? T-E-A-M, team, as opposed to themes, T-H-E-M-E-S. Oh, so much for that. Project management team is headed by the project board, and the project board is headed by the executive, somebody called the executive that represents the business. He is in turn helped, assisted by the senior user that comes from the end user department or section of the organization, and the senior supplier who represents the supply side, who are going to be building or delivering the outputs of the projects. Okay? The project manager, which most people tend to focus their attention on, quite rightly so, because he or she is the person who's going to be doing the day-to-day managing of the project. Okay. Who reports to the project manager? Okay, within the PRINCE2 terminology, we refer to them as team managers. Okay, team managers are people in charge of work groups, and who reports to the project manager. Team managers, of course, manage team members. Who else but team members? It doesn't always necessarily mean that there will always be team managers, because the project manager could also directly manage team members. And don't forget to refer to role descriptions in Appendix C in your manual, in case you want to go, you are actually studying for PRINCE2 exams, and that's not the purpose of this series, but that helps you as well. So the 4 levels of management, starting off with corporate or program management at the top, okay, and the project management theme proper under PRINCE2 would be the projects board, who directs. Okay, directs means that they don't actually do the day-to-day management. However, they give advice, they set directions, they make critical decisions within the project. The project manager, as we've said earlier on, does the day-to-day management of the project, and team managers deliver the specialist products to time, cost, and quality. Again, those will be things that we'll be talking about later on as well. Now, look at those arrows going up and down. Yep. The project board basically gives direction as well as authorization at every stage of the project. They give ad hoc guidance, because there will be situations whereby they have knowledge about what's going on at the upper levels of the organization and perhaps in the market, and they would bring that information to the attention of the project manager in case it's something outside the sphere of perception as well as influence of the project manager, and they would help the project manager deal with the rest of the organization above him, for instance. Yeah. So roles may be combined where appropriate. The kind of general guideline is to avoid any conflict of interest situation. For instance, senior users and executives positions may often be combined, but usually you would not combine the senior supplier and the executive, or the senior supplier and the senior user positions, for obvious reasons of conflict of interest. However, there are always exceptions to this general guideline in terms of conflict of interest. For example, you might be actually working for a vendor organization, so that gets a bit complicated later on, but here we are just looking at a quick overview of the PRINCE2 organization. Okay. Now, the project board rules, corporate or program management would actually be in charge of project assurance. With project assurance is a very important part of the role of the project board. So it's not just giving authorization. In terms of the role, they've got to make sure that things are happening the way they're supposed to happen, and they achieve that through a project assurance role. Okay, there is also a change authority role, because theoretically all changes has to go back to the project's board for approval. However, common sense and practicality dictates that they can and should very often delegate that role of approving changes to somebody else, right? And this delegation would be defined in that document within the PRINCE2 set of documentation called the Configuration Management Strategy, which is produced during initiation. Okay? Project support is something else which we need to talk about. Project support is something which is more at the ground level, in terms of day-to-day running of the projects, providing the kind of help to the project manager, and if it's not available as a separate person or persons handling that, then the project manager has to do that himself or herself. Just a quick walkthrough of the points about this, and again, caveat is please read up more if you are studying for the exam, and if you just want to view this series as a quick introduction to PRINCE2, that's fine. Now, again, if there's anything else you need to find out and you can't get a lot of that information and you'd like to ask me, do write in to me. And with that, we've come to the end of this session of PRINCE2 Quickie. Until the next time we meet, Seow signing off. Bye bye.